in Saro's kitchen and licked out all the pots, which was named one of the best novels of 1992. Also written a book for children, I believe. And I have to say, in 1988, she received a Guggenheim Fellowship for Fiction. In November 2007, she received the Lannan Award for Fiction for her body of work.
Process of writing, but also how we think of things in larger terms, especially these words, because these are things we often don't talk about. As novelists, professors, readers, and students, we don't really talk often about the raw emotions of literature. We talk about love. Anybody? We rarely remember the happiest date ever. You guys are like, no, I really talk about other stuff, but as soon as we start talking about babies, oh no. So you heard a story from your aunt. And fiercely take but one candle, light a room. And I thought, that's a transformative phrase. Because at that point, I'd been reading James Baldwin at 16, Lucy Maud Montgomery, the Anne of Green Gables novels I read over and over again. I read Toni Morrison and Leslie Marmon Silko. These are gold, the guilt of ancient picture frames. Every day, when we rode the bus, men would leap onto the bus, hand her a dime. That tells you how old I am, because you could make a phone call for a dime. Some people in this room won't laugh. They would hand her a dime and a piece of paper and say, baby, just call me. Just give me a chance. Just give me 5 minutes. Just give me one weekend. As I tied his shoes and I talked to him and he wasn't scared of me, and he would sit on my lap. He was 6 years old. His hair was uncombed. The sneakers were really big, the size of bread loaves on his little feet. So I knew they weren't his. He must have gotten them from an older cousin or something. Kindergarten was exhausting to him. His hair was is not to save anyone. It is, in a sense, a selfish act, and yet a generous act, is it not? For whatever reason, because my mom didn't finish high school, my dad didn't finish high school, and I got to go to college. For whatever reason, I was given this brain that translates things into literature. And they get him an apartment, and they get him a job, and he's watching cars in a parking lot. That's his job. But he's going to college, community college. And at night, once he realizes, on this very last page that I wrote by hand in a notebook, that he's going to be okay. Again, I thought he would hate his mom. Instead, he finally began to breathe once he was in the classroom. He loved the murmur of voices. I'm sorry, I did have one last thing on the family. My job is to always read poems at funerals, but I really thought that you would like this. This is the title of my new book. I'm not going to tell you about my new book. It's even darker and scarier and more horrible. And I just finished it, and it will come out next year. We're not going to talk about it. It's set in 2019, and as the way our world is going right now, it's set on the border of California and Mexico. There are characters from Oaxaca, and there are still more of the descendants of Juanette, and there is deportation, and there's lots of other stuff. But the book is called The Love of Thousands. This is a Linda Hogan poem. She's a poet. I am watching the sky. I think of the people who came before me, and how they knew the placement of the stars in the sky, watching the moving sun long and hard enough to witness how a certain angle of light touched a stone only once a year. Without written records, they knew the gods of every night, the small, fine details of the world around them, and the immensity above them. Sorry, now I'll be like you. My nephew who was killed was also a skateboarder, and he was killed on his skateboard, so. And he was only 20. I read this poem because all the skateboarders know every sidewalk and every tree and everywhere, and I thought this was perfect. Whichever road I follow, I walk in the land of many gods, and they love and eat one another. Walking, I am listening to a deeper way. Suddenly, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. I wrote that because skateboarders always walk, and Corey, Corion, who died, my nephew, also was learning the stories of his ancestors. So anyway, I wanted to end on that. Thanks, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much for your catching lecture. Good thing I didn't cry this time. So now we're ready for your questions.
Nothing?
I was very impressed with your talk and the meaning of your follow afterwards. They will open up because they need someone to express the same feeling, the same trauma they have lived, but they have kept secret for so long. Is it true in your experience as well? I mean, among the characters you have put in your novels, do they go through a similar process?
That's perfect. Because and guilt, it was repression, and we thought that was a really weird, psychoanalytical type of word. But you're right. If you can find the one person you can talk to, I mean, does everybody in this room have like the one person that you can tell anything to? Yes? No? Right? And I think my middle daughter's gonna rip this off right away. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have this for 5 minutes at my house. Thank you guys for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
And thanks
After all the obstacles.
Thanks for listening to terrible stories. But no, I was a little nervous last night. Yes, I did, but I'm from California. Yeah. Yeah, from Southern California. I know, y'all hate us, and you think you're smarter. You're all about your NorCal, we're Sureño. We're Sureño.
We know you're smarter.
Y'all are just culture. Y'all have more time to think than we just have.
Sen de fotoğraf mı çekiyorsun? Tabii doğal olm yani video çektiğim için. Ve çok güzel oldu ama hepiniz aynı anda güldünüz. Çok canlı çekiyorum. Tamam şunları aldım.
Whatever circles you guys. I have, so it's better if I sit down.
Yeah. Then in that case, it's going to be better like that because you won't have to trouble yourself with changing it, and we won't have to change the position of the mic, the audio recorder. So that's going to be that basically.
Just make, as long as everybody can see me.
Yeah. Everybody will be able to see you, and
You
we're
guys
going
are
to
the bosses. You never hear that, do you?
not really,
Oh
not
my God,
really.
what?
But thank you for that. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. It's very exciting. Yeah, that's what I mean. They got it. He actually gives the boss. He likes that.
I usually disappear behind the podium, but I hope you can see me. Well, dear colleagues, the most distinguished guests, and dear students, I'd like to welcome you to the 38th Biennial International ASAT Conference, which this year coincides with the 35th anniversary of our department called. At this point, I'd like to mention Professor Dr. Necla Aytur. from Ankara University, who unfortunately has passed a couple of weeks ago. She planted the seeds of American studies in Turkey. She was one of the co-founders of the American Studies Association of Turkey, and she founded the department at Ankara University. Yet, to commemorate Professor Artur and Professor Bertolt and all our soldiers who have lost their lives for the well-being of our country. As you well know, the theme of this year's conference is manifestations of love and hate in American culture and literature. Goes to my fellow ASAT board members, our treasurer Vahit Yaşayan, and secretary and assistant editor, assistant professor Dr. Berkem Gürenci. Is she outside? Okay. And our Vice President, Associate Professor Dr. Tanfer Elintunç, the delegates, Dr. Emine Geçgil, and of course, Assistant Professor Dr. Cem Kılıçarslan, and last but not least, the Editor-in-Chief of JAS, Associate Professor Dr. Özlem Uzundemir. Unfortunately, she cannot
Associate Professor Dr. Bilge Mutluay Çetintaş, the chair of the Department of American Culture and Literature, to make her opening remarks.
19th century Turkish poet Yunus Emre says, Yunus Emre der hoca, gerekse var bin hacca, hepsinden iyice bir gönüle girmektir. With Professor Talat Halman's translation, Yunus Emre says to you, Pharisee, make a holy pilgrimage, if need be, 100 times, but if you ask me, the visit to a heart is best of all. Allow me to remind you of another expression, the African proverb.
Caricatures of states of Europe, depicting mostly these states as women. So you see these sorts of things where the woman is Spain, obviously, and then you have Portugal, the bear. Such maps reinforce the essentialist connections between women and nature and their bodies as lands to be conquered by men. In such images, the female heart becomes the most foreign of lands, one that requires a great deal of metaphoric travel to reach, and the strongest of battalions to conquer. As this presentation will illustrate, by the 19th century, the French map of the country of tenderness, which is considered to be the first sentimental map. This map represents the emotions of love and hate as if they were real paths and places, inviting audiences on a journey through the imaginary land of tenderness. The mythical heart-shaped island of Loveland, a place where everyone should go, where romance thrives and friendships dear grow. Surrounded by the oceans of joy, Sweetheart Sound, and the Bay of Bliss, as well as serenity.
Series replaces them. Commemorative stamps are special stamps issued to commemorate, honor a special event, and they're only sale for a short while. Thus, because they are genuinely rare, exceptional, and limited, they are always the target of stamp collectors and dealers. In addition to its type, stamps are also distinguished according to their conditions, whether mint or used. Accordingly,
consider in marriages or not. It's interesting that that stamp was designed by an ex-nun. I think it says something. And she made that image through a boycott in Boston.
So yes, the title of my talk is War is Peace, Freedom is Slavery, Ignorance is Strength, Love is Hate, the legacy of Orwell's affective paradox in American cinema. And I'm going to start off where Professor, namely when she mentioned what's love got to do with it and 1984 in the same sentence. And I'm going to show you basically the true source of man's inhumanity to man is without emotion, and they're actually using a drug to not feel. So they're saying, or the leaders say, there's a disease in the heart of man. Its symptom is hate, its symptom is anger, its symptom is rage, its symptom is war. The disease is human emotion. So in order not to have these negative emotions that lead to war and destruction, they also did away with positives. It's a lot more experimental for those of you who haven't seen it than Equilibrium. In THX 1138, human beings are objectified. THX 1138 is actually the main, the protagonist, played by Robert Duvall. And likewise, as in Equilibrium, emotions have been, and especially sexual.
Now, in a culture which the marketing orientation prevails and in which material success is the outstanding value, there is a little reason to be surprised that human love relations follow the same pattern of exchange which governs the commodity and labor market. In any culture that privileges success, prestige, money, and power, this results almost inevitable. Now, speaking of people as purchasable commodities within the ever-shifting cultural milieu is quite disconcerting. This is where science fiction narrative
works. Fritz Lang's 1927 masterpiece Metropolis for the first time used a female robot that assumes the personality of a living person, a woman. The robot in the film was a medium through which a dead woman, Maria, was resurrected by a mad scientist who was in love with the woman when she was alive. The story was actually blending between mythological Pygmalion, who was trying to create his idealized lover, Galathea. In this sense, this robot was also the first example of a cyborg, as it unified a biological entity. An American film that was worth watching was Forbidden Planet, 1956, directed by Fred M. Wilcox, and it introduced Robbie the Robot. This time, the robot displayed qualities associated with other, kidnapping and threatening the classical damsel in distress. See, you all have the same. This one, this one, this one. Despite the fact that no such thing happened in the film. What is presented on the poster does not...
movie her, so. I want to ask, there are a lot of critics who say that the movie Her, hey, it deconstructs it actually, because there's this femme fatale stereotype of the cyborg seducing the man, but she uses her charms to actually escape her situation and basically manipulate.
Algeria. She's come a long way.
Yes.
Selma Mokrani. She's an associate professor in the Department of English. Badji Mokhtar Annaba University in Algeria and a permanent researcher at the LECUCRA Research Laboratory. She's been teaching literature, culture, comparative literature, literary theory, research methodology, and pragmatics at the Department of English.
Such love-hate dialectic stands as a remarkable illustration of how the two writers grappled with a society itself full of mutations and contradictions, told the stories of their nation by responding to the imperatives of nation building and race thinking, while embracing visions articulated by major nation builders. In different ways, both perceived and recorded the strain generated by these official stories told and replicated within nationalist discourses and contestation. Roosevelt's re-election in 1905 reinforced the nation's imperial enthusiasm and strengthened its martial codes. He had attacked American anti-imperialists as traitors, liars, this is quote, slanderers and scandalmongers.
No one ever talks to anyone. It's kind of right. So for a mystery novel, I had an outline because I had to know these things that happened. And the other one that I talked to you about yesterday, A Million Nightingales, I had an outline for 1,000 Midnights, which is the one I put on that map. That book I started when I was 18 years old. And it was because my future brother-in-law was even bigger. He's 6'6" and he weighs 385 pounds, my brother-in-law. I am not interested in being me, because being me is really, it's not fun. First it was boring, and then there were too many people, and now it's just like Aishul and I, we just take care of hundreds of people all day, right? No one wants to be us. No one wants, but to be somebody else, the active imagination, you know, that's what I like. I love being someone else. And usually it's someone very different from me. And if you can remember that, I write literary fiction, and she writes commercial women's fiction. So if I read her work, I'm like, this is too commercial. Like, I don't even believe they would have this conversation. But when she reads my work, she's very honest. She will tell me. She'll be like, I know you like this person, but this person's taking over the book in like a bad way. So sometimes we go through 3 drafts, and Holly is the only person that's always honest with me. So, yeah, I think you have to. So for my graduate students, I always tell them, when you're in school, you have to find your Holly. And that's how I tell them, and they're like, wait, what? And they're like, what if we're guys? And I'm like, well, you still need a Holly, okay? But you need to find your Holly, because she's...
Theme of this conference, I'd like to discuss how love, which was traditionally considered as a submissive act of a woman to his
sketches based on real events. And once she said, quote unquote, fiction is but modification of truth. So we can look into her social novels and Lena's fears parallel to the sexist views of David Fulham, who say, quote unquote, I believe the day will come when no woman will be permitted to truly test it and found to be adequate for the work. Kate is also irritated by the conviction that home should be celebrated as a place of serenity, because as she witnessed with her mother, it usually was not. She believes that being a good wife is synonymous with being a faithful slave, and the former is just as humiliating as the latter. And then there's another character which Kate used for sociological analysis and who helped her shape her own new woman identity, Marna Carton.
Allied blockade of Europe. Irvin calls this asymmetrical delivery of relief, which represented one way that the United States was drawn into the conflict on the side of the Allies before ever declaring the war, with American citizens volunteering to either fight for the belligerent forces or aid civilians and combatants. According to Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan, those times, as long as American humanitarian agents did not distinguish between the Central Powers and the Triple Entente, their efforts were exemplars of this class. Both the fundraisers in the United States and the expatriates helping this ambulance in Paris, who helped to establish this American ambulance in 1914.
Luckily, we don't have any.
Reading. Interestingly,
The focus has been firstly on the categorization of two guys, the innocent maiden, the terrible mother, or the hysterical woman, but not how death as a figure is presented. Second,
well, I tend to read Valerie O'Connor's short story, The Unusual Chill, with or through Leo Barzani's intimacies. Actually, both O'Connor's work and Barzani's book are very intricate. So, a sense of Oedipus complex. Furthermore, it appears towards the end of the story that Asbury's illness is associated with his rebellion against his mother. Breastfeeding and nurturing mother results in his being infected by Brucella bacteria. It appears at the end of the story that he became ill.
Philosophy and Turkish literature, he completed his doctoral research in the Department of Comparative Literature at the State University of New York at Binghamton, with a dissertation entitled Guarding the Thought, Heteronomy, and Philosophy. His main research areas are literary criticism, comparative literature, and modern philosophy. And the title of his presentation today is Holden Caulfield, the Spinozist Apprentice of Life. Yes, back to you.
But it overly calculated, predetermined, and socially sterile advances and responses of people like Maurice Depin, signed the process.
On one's arms and neck. A night so sulphurous, so restless, so swollen with inarticulate longing, that Lee and Gideon Bellfleur in their enormous bed quarreled once again, wrote the in a fragmented fashion, told from an omniscient narrator who reflects internal and external conflicts of the character in a synchronic way. Narrated and
of bloggist running two sites, one on radio drama and the other on adaptation studies, and today we will be talking on The Night of the Hunter. The floor is yours, sir.
Relatively aged to understand who she was, and it was directed by Charles Lawton. Is it coming? No. And it was directed by Charles Lawton, who was an actor who died in 1961. So, have I got? Oh, I've got it. There's money. $10,000 worth of money. Buried by the children whom he's abusing, if you want to call it, here. But the children are being very nice, and they're not saying anything. So he resolves to try and get them to
independent of those details. But that's the style of Joyce Carol's, because I mean she borrows.
The Konic's comic book series, Which Planet? We will hear about contemporary films by Onur Ünlü and David Lynch.
According to Witch Manifesto, all witches share the most of the following long list of characteristics. Personality-wise, witches are aggressive, strong-minded, hostile, obnoxious, achieving, overwhelming, scary, and masculine. This list of characteristics can be easily observed when taking a look at the main characters of the story, Kamo Kogo and
Schizophrenic Love. He will be comparing two film directors, Onur Ünlü and David Lynch, from the standpoint of fantasy matters and his
apples and oranges. But the manifestations of love and hate bring them closer. So, and before I begin, I should warn you about spoilers. There are hardcore sexuality. Even after he has experienced boundlessness in his metamorphosis into Pete Dayton, is a key aspect of his continuous descent into a worse and worse form of existence. This is also similar for the news movie. In his fantastic world, when the character is about to kiss the woman he loves, but suddenly a storm ray starts. So, unfolding inner psychotic cells occur when they cannot function the role that the society affiliates them with, especially gender roles and social.
Any questions? Yes.
Just a simple question to our friend.
Architecture for Black feminist thought.
Polisenik bir şey olduğu için.
Whereas cherished offspring, sheltered from the hardships of life endured in their mother country, will be granted the extraordinary opportunity to thrive and forget all about their past misery. In the harsher conditions of the agricultural population of Sicily, if compared to colored farmers, soon the Girgenti siblings gather that Italian laborers are paid less than colored workers.
When dealing with Black mothers' struggles, one cannot avoid mentioning the experience during slavery, as these determine the grandchildren's social behavior and family relations.
Professor Arda Arıkan, who completed his PhD at Penn State University in the field of multilingual and multicultural education, language and literature.
In many ways, she reminds me of James Baldwin and his relationship with Turkey. I was wondering if you could comment about that. Did you find any overlapping similarities, any different?
To me, I think she was an epitome of a disenchanted community. The African American community, had experienced a kind of conflictual existence, slavery, Jim Crow.
It takes a village.
No? Well, think about it then. What about some themes you would like